it was statistical evidence that helped convict her, not just medical evidence. And the main statistical construct that a number of statisticians have said was just a statistical abomination. I think one statistician called it a scientific fake.
Peter Elston joins me now here in the studio, a statistician and fellow of the Royal Statistical Society with a background in the financial sector. A warm welcome to you, Peter. Thanks for being with us. Look, your focus in this case came about before the trial in October 2021. You feared it was going to be a miscarriage of justice. Just explain what alerted you initially.
So, you may be wondering why on earth I have an interest in this case. What's financial industry got to do with this miscarriage of justice case? Well, the answer is statistics. And having applied statistics for 35 odd years in the financial industry, you can actually apply statistics in certain miscarriage of justice cases where you have what's called a cluster case, an increase in the number of events. It doesn't have to be healthcare. The post office scandal was a classic cluster case where all of a sudden there were hundreds of postmasters being accused of fraud, and you can appraise these clusters, these spikes. And
in this case, these are the deaths and the attempted murders of these babies.
Yeah, and so combine that interest in statistics with I don't know quite where it comes from, but a visceral abhorrence of injustice, and also the fact that actually my mum was a nurse. She trained at St Thomas's, just around the corner from here, and a magistrate. So there's an interest, personal interest there as well. And in October 22, I saw on the news that this case of this nurse accused of murdering 7 babies and harming 15 others was about to begin in Manchester. And I realised it was a classic cluster case. So did a bit of digging, dug up a few documents, one of which was a report by the Royal College of Paediatric and Child Health, which was commissioned by the hospital when they became aware of this cluster. And it was a litany of issues and failings. So issues such as there being a particular increase in admissions of low birth weights, an increase in admissions of low gestational ages, an increase in admissions for particularly high acuity, how unwell the babies were. And then you had a number of failings in relation to understaffing. There was a reluctance for doctors to escalate concerns. There were issues with certain clinical procedures. Umbilical venous catheter insertion was highlighted as a problem. There were issues with the transport network. And to me, I looked at that and I thought, well, hang on, that looks to me like an explanation as to why there was this spike in mortality. There were other documents I dug up. There was a schedule of mortality data, which was acquired via an FOI a few years earlier. And that showed that, yes, there was this spike, but there were a lot more than just the 7 deaths that Letby was being charged with. There were 17 in total. So what was happening with these other...
And she could only be associated with 7 of those.
Well, she was only charged with 7 of these 17.
Yeah.
And in fact, since then, it seems that there are quite a few more than 17. But there were, in other words, there was a spike both in deaths that she was being charged with and a spike in deaths that she wasn't being charged with. So what was going on there? Was there another serial killer? Was there some other factor that was behind these other 10
and all the
deaths?
other factors you mentioned as well.
Indeed.
All the other, parts to this need to be considered.
So I wrote on my blog that, and of course the trial hadn't started at that point, and I wrote that there may well be incontrovertible evidence against her, her being caught in the act, in which case, of course, there would be very little doubt of her guilt. But that if there wasn't any, there was still a very good chance that she would be found guilty, because there are many cases where flawed statistics are presented. There's some horrific cases of miscarriage of justice in this country. The dreadful one of Sally Clark, the mother found guilty of killing her two children. But there are many other cases of miscarriage of justice of caregivers, and in all of those, there are some commonalities. You often have an expert witness who comes along and says, this caregiver was harming.
Yeah. So you were immediately concerned before the trial that there would be a miscarriage of justice. Of course, the trial went on, and we know that she was found guilty of the murder of 7 babies and the attempted murder of 7 others.
Yeah.
So what you wrote about came to pass effectively. And today we have 14 experts, mainly within the neonatal field, from different countries, who are questioning the evidence used. I mean, it's interesting because her defence didn't actually, well, in fact, there was a lack of statistics and correct application of statistics throughout the trial. That was a criticism by the Royal Statistical Society and other people who I've spoken to here on the show who form part of that. So there was that issue. There was the lack of any sort of statistics or medical evidence presented by her defence team, I understand. And there was an inappropriate, this is what the panel say today, a sort of inappropriate use of research and analysis used as medical evidence. That is the sort of crux, to kind of simplify it, because there are lots of different examples, but effectively the evidence used was not strong enough and was not applied properly enough. Would you agree with that, based on what you've heard of the news conference today, based on your concerns, which are statistical concerns,
Yes.
spikes in data that are raising alarm when they shouldn't do, or things that aren't being taken into context properly?
Yes.
Do you follow suit? Do you agree with what you've heard today of the concerns of these experts?
So after the verdicts in August 2023, the CPS posted a page on its website outlining the 4 types of evidence that were used to convict Letby. You have this roster chart showing that she, purportedly showing that she was present for all of these 25 incidents.
Door swipe data.
So that was in relation to one particular case.
Okay.
But just going through the 4 types, so you have the roster chart, which must have been very compelling for jurors. Then you have these so-called confession notes, these handwritten notes. Then you have the digital evidence of text messages. And then finally you have the medical evidence, which was presented by 6 expert doctors and 1 expert nurse, who all invoked intentional harm, inflicted harm. And what happened today was that the reports of these 14 medical experts set out what they thought were the causes of these babies' deaths and collapses. And they didn't present all 17, they presented 7 of them. And in every single case, not just the 7, but all 17, they invoked either a natural cause of death or some sort of suboptimal care in every single one.
Do you agree, without being a medical expert, do you largely go along with their findings? Because there will be a debate now on whether this evidence is strong enough, on whether they're correct in their analysis, in their decision on sort of how these babies die. Because of course this is the opinion and the esteemed experience of lots of medical experts. We heard from them during the trial. We've got a different set here, largely, who are saying something else. Where does your mind go to?
Well, you said just then that I'm not a medic, and so I'm very careful.
It would be difficult to comment on this.
About commenting on it.
Yeah.
But there were certain things that were presented today that, the experience of these 14 experts was set out very clearly. The fact that there are 500 man-years of experience. These 14 experts are not only neonatologists, etc., but they're right at the top of their field. You contrast that with the experience of the prosecution medical experts, and the main one being this retired paediatrician, and that kind of speaks for itself.
To sum up, we know the Criminal Cases Review Commission is going to be reviewing the report produced by these medical experts today that's being presented by Lucy Letby's lawyers. Would your argument be, yes, of course, look at that, but I've got some other things for you to look at here. I'm concerned about the statistical evidence that hasn't been presented that should be. Would that be what you're advocating for? That's not just medical evidence. You've potentially got something else to bring forward here.
Yes, absolutely. Because the CPS said that it was statistical evidence that helped convict her, not just medical evidence. And the main statistical construct that a number of statisticians have said was just a statistical abomination. I think one statistician called it a scientific fake. That was something that was very compelling for jurors. And actually, there was an article in Unheard magazine very recently, which actually produced another roster chart, which didn't have this uninterrupted line of X's saying that Lucy Letby was present for all these 25, because it was based upon the opinions of this main expert when he first provided opinions. And in fact, he cited several incidents, 10 incidents, when she actually wasn't there on duty.
Look, we need to leave it there for time, sadly. It's been fascinating to hear from you. Thank you. Do keep us posted. There is, and seems like there is more to come on this. Indeed, for sure. Yeah. Thank you. Peter Elston, a statistician and fellow of the Royal Statistical Society. Thanks for being with us.